Hello, everybody, and welcome to the monthly market update for February 2022. So, I have three topics that I really want to dive into this month. The first one is going to be home ownership as a hedge against inflation. The second one, I want to discuss the rising interest rates. And the third one, forbearance and where we are. But as I was recording these, I realized that it's a lot, especially with the home ownership as a hedge against inflation. Like really digging in and giving you all the information that I wanted to. So I've decided for this month, we're actually going to break it up into a three-part series. So part one is today's, and we're going to discuss, or I'm going to walk you through the home ownership as a hedge against for inflation. So I hope that you get a lot out of this. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to let me know, or any suggestions on things that you would like us to discuss. So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you. So I'm going to begin with my first topic, home ownership as a hedge against inflation. Now you're probably wondering, Gina, why is this even important and why are we talking about it? Well, as you know, prices are rising from the gas pump to the grocery store, and home ownership is certainly not immune from that in any way. As you know, neither is rising rent, and that's something I'm going to discuss in a little bit more detail in just a second. But one of the things I want to focus on is how locking in someone's fixed monthly cost, the biggest cost that they have in home ownership at today's prices, is so beneficial to safeguarding someone against the rising inflation and the cost around us going forward. So I want to begin with a quote first from, here we go, Investepedia. It says, real estate is one of those time-honored inflation hedges. It's a tangible asset, and those tend to hold their value when inflation reigns, unlike paper assets. More specifically, as prices rise, so do property values. So what we can see here is that home ownership is one of those things that you can lock in the cost today. It's an asset that's increasing in value in time as prices rise and home values rise and all of the prices around us rise. You know, locking in that fixed cost in home ownership is really game changing as a hedge against inflation tomorrow. So what I want to do on the next slide is I want to give you a visual that really depicts what we're talking about, home ownership outperforming inflation over time. So looking at this slide here, this is home ownership as a hedge against inflation, and I want to break it down for you so you can really see what we're talking about here. This is home price appreciation versus the consumer price increases over the decade, and it really goes all the way back to the 1970s. Now, what you're looking at here is in the blue bars are the average inflation rate for the decade, and the green bars are the average home price appreciation for those decades as well. So let's look at the 70s to start. Inflation increased at 7.1% in that decade, and home values appreciated at 9.9% in the same time period. So home ownership outperformed inflation. And where do you want to be in inflationary times? In an asset that's outperforming inflation. Now, in the 1980s, it was a little bit more balanced, 5.6% inflation to 5.5% home appreciation. And look at the 90s. We started to see home values tick up again and a little bit more, outperforming inflation through that decade. Now, we know the 2000s were a very different. Home prices performed at a very low rate than we've seen in many other decades, and even what we're seeing today and potentially tomorrow. We also had a fundamentally different housing market. We had the oversupply of homes. We had lending standards that were vastly different than what they are today. Homeowners did not have the equity that they had in their homes right now. So fundamentally a different market where we're not headed going forward. So home prices did not outperform inflation in the 2000s. But now let's look at the 2010s. This is where home values really started to kick in. Homes started appreciating much faster than inflation. we see 4.9% versus 1.8, and then 2020 and 2021. You know what's happened here? Massive home appreciation. You know, a drastic difference where home values outperformed inflation. So over time, you can see that home ownership is generally looked at as this great hedge against inflation because home values are performing better than the inflation rate. That means that someone buying a home today can lock in today's cost and protect themselves against the rising cost of inflation in their biggest monthly payment going forward. Now, this becomes really important when we start to talk about renting, because renting takes on a risk of the rising rental prices year after year after year. And I want to share with you another quote. It says this, and it's from Bankrate. It says, a fixed rate mortgage allows you to maintain the biggest portion of your housing expense at the same payment. Sure, property taxes will rise and other expenses may creep up, but your monthly housing payment remains the same. That's certainly not the case when you're renting, and that's because rental prices year after year and so becomes really powerful for someone who might be sitting here going, I could buy today, but I'm going to kind of press pause and I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait and see what happens to home values, if they drop, if they rise. Well, all the forecasts are saying that the home values are projected to continue to rise. So with that being said, so is your rent. We also know that mortgage rates are projected to keep rising, and we know that rental prices are rising. So what does that mean at the end of the day? Someone who continues to rent, but who could buy, is taking on the additional increase in rent year after year, plus it's going to cost you more to buy a home down the road. So really important for renters to understand this dynamic, and I think this next visual really helps show how home prices compare to inflation. This shows that rent increase has been greater than inflation in most years. So let me break that out again. Rental price appreciation versus core inflation rate, again, going all the way back to the 70s. So your blue line in the core inflation rate and your green line is the rental price appreciation. And what do we see on a whole? The light green higher than the blue line in most scenarios, meaning that rental prices have been increasing at a faster rate than inflation in most times. Yes, there's some ticks down in that blue line. However, it's more than it means that it's more expensive rent over time because rental prices are continuing to rise faster than the rate of inflation. So when I'm talking to renters, it becomes really important, like mission critical almost, that you understand the dynamic of buying now if you can, and avoid those increasing costs for rent and inflation all around us. So let me go ahead and share this quote. I think it really kind of brings it home for us. It says, this is from Forbes, and again, it's saying homeowners are shielded from mounting rental prices because their cost is fixed, regardless of what's happening in the market. We're locking in that payment as today's cost. So tangible assets like real estate get more valuable over time. You've seen that in the graphs and in the data that I've shown you, which makes buying a home a good way to spend your money during inflationary times. All right, you know we've talked a lot about home price appreciation, and I'm sure you want to know where that's headed as this conversation, and we think about rising prices, and new homes aren't immune to that. That's for certain. So let's look at the next graph from Home Price Expectation Survey, and I think this gives a clear picture of where home values are projected to head according to the experts. Now, the Home Price Expectation Survey is a survey of 100 economists, data analysts, people who are projecting out home price appreciation. And in the fourth quarter of the last year, this is the projection for cumulative housing appreciation by 2026. So what are we looking at? They divided it out into two groups, into optimists and pessimists. Optimists being the ones projecting the most appreciation over the next appreciation over the next 5 years, and pessimists estimating that on the low side. So let's look at that orange bar. Those are the pessimists. You know that the experts that are saying home appreciation on the lower side, cumulatively, like as a whole, by 2026, there's going to be over 23%. So as experts look forward, the conditions of the market, what's projected to happen? Home values are expected to increase in value over time, even on the lower end. 23%, 23.7 is a pretty significant over the next 5 years. So locking in today's cost is really important for those who have the opportunity to do so, to protect themselves against the largest monthly payment, because as we know, with the home price rising, mortgage rates rising, inflation all around us, it's going to get more expensive to purchase a home. So I'm going to... All right, so I hope you got a lot out of that topic. And next week, I'm going to follow up with rising mortgage rates, and then followed by forbearance where we currently are. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. And you have a phenomenal week. Thank you so much.